Hey, just ordering some stuff on Amazon, some more yarn and some index cards, because we got a case coming back that I know you'll remember, but it's very hard to keep everybody straight. Good afternoon. I'm Michael Bryant. Welcome to the Law and Crime Network. We are beginning a trial next week. This is for a man accused of plotting the murder of his former brother-in-law, Charlie Adelson. Remember that name? He's been accused of hiring a hitman, and that was Sergio Garcia, already found guilty, and also Catherine Magbanua, who was also found guilty in a separate trial. All of them involved, allegedly, according to this current defendant, of conspiring to kill FSU law professor Dan Markel. Prosecutors allege that Adelson hired the hitman to kill Markel during this, it was a big custody battle between Markel and his sister, not Markel's sister, Markel's wife. See, I need my yarn and cards already. Charlie Adelson, who's going to be on trial, he was having a fight over the kids. So the trigger man, again, Sigfredo Garcia, and his co-defendant, Catherine Magbanua, both tried, both convicted. Charlie Adelson's trial is going to begin next week with opening statements. You'll remember this. The guy's driving, and he gets home, pulls the car into the garage, and bam, bam, right through the window on the driver's side of the car, dead. He's on the phone at the time, so there's some unbelievable audio of what's happening. Anyway, we have a great interview that our own Anjanette Levy put together. This is an interview with the mother of the victim in this case, Dan Markel. So let's listen to this.
Yes, so Dan had a routine at the time that he was killed. He was divorced and they had shared custody. And Dan took his children, as was his routine. He took the children to creative daycare. And then after that, he went to the gym. This was his normal routine. And what was amazing is when Dan used to come home from work or from certain places, he would call me. And Dan called me that morning, and he spoke to me for about 20 minutes, and then he said, Ma, I have to get off the phone. And normally he drives into the driveway, and he actually tells me I'm home, but he says, I have to get off the phone, I have to make a call, because I want to speak to somebody at this charter school, and I have a time commitment with this teacher. And I said, sure. Anyway, we got off the phone. And the worst thing in the world happened. He drove into the driveway and he was shot. And the teacher heard it. And he called 911. And also his neighbor, his next door neighbor, who actually had the guts to walk over and hear and see Danny. And he had not quite died yet. He was then taken to the hospital. And he was taken in around by 11:30, 12 o'clock. Noon, let's say, and he died the next day, July 19th. And this was a murder, and it was not random. It was horrific. Theories. Many people actually felt right away that it possibly, allegedly, possibly could be the family of his ex-wife. I myself was really quite open to other theories. And in our first meeting with law enforcement, which was really the day after we arrived in Tallahassee, I mentioned I was not closed off to anything, but that was the running, everybody, I would say, and we had a very large memorial in Tallahassee that next day, which was the 20th. And as everybody came over and talked to us, I would say, honestly speaking, that many people, almost most of the people who walked over, had already thought this was potentially somebody in the family.
So interesting comments there from the mother of the victim. And this happened almost 10 years ago. Again, Dan Markel killed by what we now know was the hitman, Sigfredo Garcia, and Catherine Magbanua was also involved in that. But now this guy was talked about so many times in the prior trials, but had not been brought in as a co-defendant at the time. So now Charlie Adelson will be facing trial next week. Bob Motta is still here. He is a criminal defense attorney and host of the Defense Diaries. He's just now stopped talking about the Delphi trial, trail trial, which we may get into again. Who knows? I can't stop him. Catherine Lizardo is also here. Good to have you, Catherine. She is a trial attorney in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So, Catherine, let me start with you. I'm sure you recall the first go-around, actually two go-arounds, because remember, they were tried together, Sigfredo Garcia and Catherine Magbenoit. And they were hung on her, and they had to retry her, but ultimately she was convicted as well. So now we have Charlie Adelson involved, and this was the kind of like, how come he wasn't named? That was talked about when these first two trials happened. Now he is. Now he's in the midst. What do you think is going to happen in this trial?
I think what's going to happen is similar to what happened with the first two defendants. Yes, I remember those trials. Catherine Magbenoit was really trying to say that it wasn't her, obviously, that she was not part of it. But the jury in that trial convicted her. So we can assume that there's a high chance that would happen with him as well. Now, the curious thing is, how would what the defense now knows from the previous trials be used to help Adelson here in the new trial? If I was a defense counsel, obviously I will look at those previous trials and see what those strengths and weaknesses are and use that in support of my client here. But his chances are slim, I think.
I do remember, Bob, one of the star witnesses was another, really a player, Wendi Adelson, because it was her kids with Dan Markel that were the subject of the custody battle. She was not so likable. She came off very smug and a little bit highfalutin, and I'm very curious to see how that plays out this time. Pretty important stuff, I would think.
Yeah, she was not likable. An interesting note, she appears to be wearing the same suit that I've seen her in court with, the same suit that she wore during the first trial. Interesting fact. Yeah, she was not likable. And, the thing about her that's interesting is that, look, we know that her brother, I'm sure, loves her very much. But in terms of who's the puppet master here, you have to think that it was Wendi, right? I mean, he's doing it at her behest. The problem, as with many times that you have a case where there's somebody's been hired for murder, is the evidence or lack thereof. Now with Charlie, it took them so long to charge him, but they were working this case. The feds were working this case like a rented mule, and they ended up getting a couple of very powerful recordings that the judge actually just made a very important ruling last week, finding in the motions in limine, finding that in particular the one in the restaurant, where he makes a really damning statement that it was going to be admissible. So that type of evidence is going to be crucial and critical, because otherwise it's what a tangled web we weave type of situation, where you've got Katie in the middle, and then her ex-boyfriend, and then his homie, coming in from Florida or wherever he came in from, and they're the ones that are doing the deed. But then when you inject Adelson into it and Charlie's there, it starts to make more sense, because at the end of the day, what this thing was about was a child custody fight. There's nothing that disgusts me more than one parent killing another parent, thinking that that's in the best interest of their children. I don't know in what world that anyone would ever think. I don't care how much you hate your ex-spouse, it's never the best move to kill your children's other parent, ever.
Just a rule you like to follow. I
think it's a pretty solid rule.
I think that's pretty good, yeah. I do appreciate your reference to her trial outfit. But it does mean I need to take a little more time planning my own wardrobe. You're very critical of the clothing.
So it's up to you, man.
Yeah. So it'll be very interesting. Producer Juliana showed us a little flashback of Miss Adelson on the stand there, and I got a chill. So it'll be very interesting to see how she testifies in this case. But for now, we have more from Dan Markel's mom, Ruth, again interviewed by Anjanette Levy. Let's watch that.
No, there hasn't been communication about him, but there has been communication in the period since his arrest. In 2022, I had worked with a very large group of people in Tallahassee to pass something called the Markel Act, which was legislation to allow us to visit under certain circumstances. And when that was passed, we didn't see Wendi and speak to the children for 6 years after the arrests. And so in the period of